All right, I'm with you in a tick, Kim.
Got you, Ben.
Do you know what? It's been way too long since I heard the full album version of Kim Wilde's Cambodia, but it's 16 past 5 here on ABC Gold Coast. It was about time, wasn't it, as the helicopter rotors roar out of this studio. And the woman herself, Kim Wilde, steps, well, not into the studio as such, but via Zoom live right now from Hertfordshire. And I'm looking at you,
Hey,
Kim Wilde. Hello.
hello, Ben. How the hell are you?
Well, I'm great. I mean, this is as good as life gets as far as I'm concerned, because Kids in
Bless you.
America was my first single, like to own
Oh,
the single. And I just, I've grown up with you. So I'm going to try not to turn it into too much of a fangirl moment.
oh, but that's very sweet. I'm very
Yeah.
flattered,
Well, I'm
always.
sure I'm not the only one in the world because, you sold a few million, didn't you, of Kids in America? Just how
It did
big
okay.
how you did okay.
Yeah, I mean, it brought me back to Australia. I mean, I've been to Australia, came first when I was 13 with my dad, and he was performing there. And I didn't get back to Australia until 1981 when I came back to promote Kids in America, which was so exciting for me. I'd got such gorgeous memories of it as a child, really. And I remember hanging out with Molly Meldrum and getting up to all sorts of nonsense with him. So yeah, lovely, sweet memories of coming back in the early 80s, but quite a few times subsequently, I've toured with Howard Jones over there, with you and with Nick Kershaw also, and I came back with a whole bunch of 80s artists, and now I'm coming back in October to do the Greatest Hits tour.
Exactly. And if you're going to talk about greatest hits, I mean, you hold the record for the most charted British female solo act of the 1980s, at least in terms of UK hits, UK top 40 singles. You had 17 of those in the 1980s. So there's a few hits to choose from when you play at Twin Towns here later in the year. Can we just go
Yeah.
back to Kids in America? And I don't want to only focus on that song, but of course it was the song. And interestingly, you've already mentioned your dad. Maybe remind people the fact that your dad was a very well known musician in the UK, but he wrote that for you, didn't he? With the help of your brother.
He did. I mean, you have to remember when I was 20 years old, my dad was only 40. He was a young dad and a young man, and very in love with pop music. I'd learned a lot about music through his record collection actually over the years. And he started writing with Ricky, and they came up with this song called Kids in America, which was a sort of an homage to all things American in one way. It had a little sort of streak of rebellion about it. And I just thought it sounded great. I just thought, well, can I do that? And they said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it all happened very spontaneously. There was no big plan to launch me or anything like that. I was happy to do backing vocals and be a session singer and earn a bit of cash and, be in music and do, and I would have been very happy doing that too.
Yeah, I had read that about you, that you didn't really have that ambition to be a star. You actually were sad your sights quite well and truly set on being a session muso. So what's the moment, other than that song, and obviously you've got your dad and your brother in your corner, but what's the moment where someone says, hang on a minute, bring her from the back and you're now the star, and not just a star, but you become a superstar, Kim Wilde?
Well, yeah, I guess it was Mickey Most. We went to his record label, and of course, he was a great Svengali of music, and he discovered Suzi Quatro and produced Land House of the Rising Sun by the Animals, um, and had huge hits with Hot Chocolate and Racy and whole load of other artists. And he's the one, really. He's the one that said, "Hey, is that your sister? Can she sing?" And then it all started, all a bit fairy tale like, actually.
I was wondering about, because you're entering this big, that can be quite I mean, it can be quite a nasty industry, actually, is my understanding. Any of these industries, whether it's film, whether it's music, and there's, different characters out there that want to take advantage, particularly of young women. And I wondered whether having your father and your brother gave you a sense of, and I don't know if safety is the right word, but I wonder, well, what would you make of that word safety? Did you feel, I don't know, that you had some kind of extra superpower to you because you were in a safe situation with people you knew and trusted?
Well, that goes a long way. I was surrounded by people who I loved and trusted, and one of them was my dad. The other was my brother, and then my mum, who was managing my dad at the time. She took over the reins for a while of all things business, and then one of my oldest, closest friends jumped on board, and he helped coordinate my career, which was worldwide. At that point, it happened very, very quickly. Needed a few hands on deck, and everyone who was working with me at that moment in time, that pivotal moment in time, were people who I loved very much and trusted, implicitly. So yes, I did feel protected. I did feel safer perhaps than I would have done had they not been there.
On ABC Gold Coast, you're with Bern Young, and live right now with me from Hertfordshire is Kim Wilde, which is pretty wild in my opinion, because we've all grown up with you either on the TV when we were watching Countdown or on our posters from whatever magazine we were, buying at the time, Smash Hits and the like. In fact, I wonder,
Yeah.
what do you make of the modern world now where younger artists, and I've read that you're a big fan of someone like Taylor Swift, for instance, and her business savvy. What do you make of social media versus the way that you were out there in the 80s, which required music magazines and required music TV shows? What comparisons do you see and what differences do you see?
Well, I mean, there's an ultra exposure now that I think would have really floored me, I think. And I think it does floor a lot of artists now. It's very intimidating, some of it. Um, uh, that it's around you all the time. I mean, there's no escape from it almost. At least during the time when my career was beginning, there was some escape, there wasn't when we didn't even have mobile phones then. I mean, that we didn't even have the internet then. So there was a lot of privacy connected with being very, very, very famous, and as exposed as I was, there was at least some point at which you could escape that. But these days, there's very little escape from it. I feel, and I think that takes a heavy toll on the mental health of artists now.
Yeah, which would help if then you can escape into the garden. I do love this quote about you, Kim Wilde. You are the only person in history, the only person in history to obtain a #1 US charting single and a gold medal at the Chelsea Flower Show. Tell me about your horticulture life, because this was when you kind of stepped back from music, wasn't it? Because you were, in a way, you wanted to get away from this whole I'm 1980s Kim Wilde and who am I
Yeah.
now? And you become a mom and you have kids
Yeah,
and you become a gardener.
I'd got married, I had 2 children, I had a mortgage, I wasn't 21 anymore. I certainly wasn't size 10 anymore. And I just thought, you know what, I've moved into a different phase of life now, and I'm very, very happy with that. And bringing up my kids, and taking a big, big step back out of the limelight. It was a relief, actually, a real relief. And I've been very famous since I was 20, 21, and I was 36. And for me to get out was a relief. But gardening found me really quickly as, first of all, because I wanted to make a garden for the kids to grow up in. I wanted somewhere where I could, grow vegetables and flowers, and make a beautiful enchanted garden for them to grow up in. But very quickly it all just escalated, and before I knew it, I was doing TV gardening, and I was writing books about gardening, and I was writing for newspapers and magazines about gardening, and then I was doing even more TV, and ended up with a gold medal at the Chelsea Flower Show. So I mean,
I mean,
I
that's no
didn't.
easy feat, is it? I mean, just to put it in perspective for people, it's not easy to get a gold medal at the Chelsea Flower Show, is it?
No, no, it's not easy to get one of those. And of course, everyone goes for gold when they go to Chelsea. Otherwise, you don't go to Chelsea if you're not going for gold. But to get one, wow, it was a very overwhelming moment, and puts a big smile on my face every time I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Because of course you've had such success in your music career, and the idea that a gold medal at a flower show is just as important is a really beautiful thing. It's
Mhm.
interesting how you've been brought back into music then, this rise and rise of the popularity of looking back nostalgically at the 80s. And in a way, I know there would have been a point where, you were trying to say, hey, I'm more than Kids in America. I'm more than Checkered Love. I'm more than the 80s. So how do
Mhm.
you marry those things now to say, okay, well, no, own it and love it?
Well, I have been making several albums in the last 20 years. And so I sort of, that's been enough for me. And they've done pretty well, actually. So, and I've been able to evolve more and more as a songwriter and continue working with my brother Ricky, which I just absolutely love. And we're recording a new album now, which is coming out January next year. So I've kept very active as a creative as well as wanting to sing the old hits over and over again. And when you play them in front of an audience and you see how they respond, it keeps the energy very high for those songs. Just the reaction you get is astounding, and it seems to get stronger and stronger every year. And every time one of the songs starts up, you can see you can feel it's like a tsunami coming towards you of utter joy, and you think, oh, bless these people, and many of who went out and bought that record, and you want to make it as wonderful and a great experience for them as you can. So it's very, very motivating. It's never boring, it's never dull, it's never the same, it's always new. Always new, every single audience, it's always new. And we treat each gig as like it was the most important thing in the world.
Yeah, looking at you and hearing you say that, I know that that's not just a line, because it could be, couldn't it? Especially after you perform those songs so many times. Look, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I don't even know how to finish with you, Kim Wilde, because it really has been wild for me to just link up with you live on radio. I do this so rarely that somebody joins me of your caliber. Often we're making these interviews in the middle of your night or my morning or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
then we replay them and we edit them and we make them perfect. But it's just been a delight. One of the things I really picked up on, and maybe you can just finish on this for a minute, is just how much of a music fan you have always been from the 1960s when you were born into the now. So is there a now artist that you're just thinking, this is what I'm listening to, something new that you're listening to, or something old that you're revisiting yourself?
I mean, my taste is very eclectic, you know. There's a folk rock band called Bonnie Light Horseman who I absolutely adore. I love Lizzo, and I love the great R&B tracks that she makes, and Beyonce, of course. And of course, as you mentioned before, I'm really very down bad with the Taylor Swift thing at the moment. I'm disappearing down that little rabbit hole, enjoying every moment of it. So yeah, that's actually on my playlist right now is a lot of Taylor Swift. So I can highly recommend it.
The Swifty that is Kim Wilde, joining you here on ABC Gold Coast as the seconds tick down to the latest ABC news. We can't wait to see you here in Australia in the end of the year, October it will be. And you're playing very, very close to us here. Just across the border is a place called Twin Towns. In fact, it's right on the border, and that's where you're going to be playing. Kim Wilde, thank
Yeah.
you so much for taking the time out of your night over there in the UK, and lots of love from us here in Australia.
Oh, bless you. I can't wait to get back. Just lots of love to everyone. Can't wait.
Cheers. That
Bye.
is Kim Wilde here on ABC Gold Coast as we get the very latest ABC news now. It's right on 5:30.